so that would have been a net loss either way. Alright, we're a little delayed due to the technical difficulty, but we're all good now, it appears. So we can move on to the lighting and texturing portion of our title sequence. So I'm going to open up my reference, and let's see what my goals for today are. Alright, so we've got a little bit of a gradient on some of these letters, although I'm not sure how much of that I'll try to replicate inside of Cinema 4D. And then I've got some green here on these lower letters. So I'm going to open this up in Photoshop, actually, so I can color pick some of these color values. So just give this a moment. Any day now. Go. Alright. Maybe not.
Takes a minute. I opened it earlier and it was slow.
Riveting lecture. I know. Alright. So I'm going to open up my screenshot. And I'm going to start with these letters on the bottom because those look pretty easy to get done real quick. So I need to turn off the pixel grid because that thing is awful. Where's that? Wow, this is... Oh man. Oh man. View, show, pixel grid off. Okay. I can zoom in without being disturbed. So I've got my... That is tiny. Got this over here. So I'm going to drag the RGB, I'm just going to drag this window to my other monitor so that way I don't have to jump back and forth. But I'm going to make a material and I'm going to enter in RGB values that correspond to my Photoshop. Cool. So, oopsies. Yeah, can't show them both at the same time. Yeah, that's my color value. So this is my lower text material. And I'm going to apply that down here. Pretty easy. Cool. And then let's get one of these colors going for my upper layer. And I'm not sure how much of this will be visible, but there's like a little bit of kind of lightning on the upper portions of some of these letters, as if there's like a bit of a gradient. I'm probably... I think I'm going to start with the darker side. And we'll see if we can take a stab at doing that gradient within Cinema 4D or not. So I've just got my RGB up on my other monitor again. I know this is super exciting, but not all stages of art are exciting. This is my upper text material. So I'm trying to name everything I can from the start of this, that way I don't wind up with 83 cube number 4s at the end, and then a bunch of just materials. So I'm going to get my camera now set up. I can actually probably try to do a background. Yeah, let me try to do, I think actually I'm going to do the camera first. So I'm going to jump in my camera, and my my shot is a pretty straightforward. There's no like perspective really to mine, or if there is, it's very, very little. So I'm going to actually zero out my camera. So I'm going to punch 0 in on all these numbers, and you'll see that something will disappear at first. But I know that I want to pull back in the z-axis because of the way that I've set my scene up. So I'm just pulling my position Z backwards on my camera, and I'm zooming out. And one thing that would be useful right now is we can see if I raise the opacity of the border region here, my render aspect resolution is not set up to be 16:9. This is a movie, it's a video that's uploaded to YouTube, so the aspect ratio of it is HD aspect ratio. So first things first, I'm going to set up my width and height, and that will, as you'll see, impact how much of this is visible. So that's an important thing. If you can figure it out in your scene, which you guys all know your render resolution, we've said it many, many times so far. So it's a good idea to set up your camera with that in mind, pretty much from the start, if you can. If you know what size you're going to render to, there's no point waiting, because you might animate your camera or move objects around or proportion things, and then when you go to change your render resolution, as I just did, you'll see that this proportioning changes. And you could have animated a camera, and now you have to reanimate the camera because now different stuff is visible. So there's actually a little bit of perspective on the sides of some of my letters that are off to the far sides of my frame, and that is because my focal length is relatively wide, and by wide I mean it's at the default value, which is somewhat low. So I'm going to try to raise this up to like 100, and then I'm going to pull my camera back, and I'm just going to see what this effect has. So we're seeing less perspective on the sides of my letters now, although I see next to no perspective on mine. Getting a hint of like a tiny little hint of one in the very beginning as we're closer to the text. So I'm actually going to raise my focal length up a little more, try like 150. I'm not going to try to get it perfect just for the sake of brevity today. So as far as my scene's animation goes, it's not too complex. Some of you guys will definitely have a more lively scene or more lively animations or camera movements or whatever. Mine is a little bit more on the moody side, and I'm going to utilize some After Effects techniques to kind of enhance mine. But feel free to, if you don't know After Effects and you just want to stick to Cinema 4D for the most part, maybe jazz up your animation a little bit if your scene calls for it. So now what I want to do, I think, is I want to figure out I want to figure out how zoomed out I need to start. And if I can pause it, nope. So this looks like the very end, so I'm going to take a screenshot of this. I'm not being exactly super perfect, but this will get the job done. since I don't have that complex of a camera move, I kind of want to try to get it, you know, as well recreated as I can. And then I'm going to try to rewind this, hopefully, and then do another screenshot. And this will be my camera start. Now I'm going to load these into into Cinema 4D. Sorry. By again loading in an image, you want to hit Shift V, and that'll bring up this back menu. And so I need to be in my oopsie daisy. I need to be in my front camera. It says very explicitly up here, front, not perspective right now. So I can reload a different image. So I'm going to do camera start. And now what I'm going to do, actually I think I want to do, since I only need to really pay attention to my perspective view and my front view, I'm going to change, if I can get this to stop freaking out, go to Arrangement, to Views. I'm just going to do side by side for now. So I'm going to change this camera to the front camera. And so in this one, apologies, I have to reload my image. So what I'm going to try to do, I think, is figure out how far I need to move this back. Now, does this move anything? No. Now, this isn't going to be very scientific by most people's judgment, but I'm going to keyframe. I'm just going to keyframe my camera Z position. At the start, I think I've got this lined up pretty good. And then I'm going to load in, I'm going to load in now my camera end image, and so now I'm just going to zoom it out a little bit, or zoom it in, sorry. Oh, wait, no, I'm going to zoom it back because I want to shrink this text. So like I said, this isn't going to be very scientific because I'm just trying to eyeball the distance of these letters over here. So if I just play this, yeah, something like that. And I know that my movie file is 5 seconds long, because when I open it in here it says 5 seconds. So I'm just going to make my scene a little bit longer. Give myself some more frames right there, and then grab this camera keyframe, slide this over to frame 150. So now this will just play out a little bit slower. I think that'll be good. So let's jump back and kind of look at this. I think I will try to see if I can get some of this highlighting in my letters now, just because I don't have a whole lot more that I have to do. I think I can go into some of the reflection settings real quick. So I'm going to alter the specular of my my top material a little bit. I'm just going to lower the strength a bit, I think. And I'm going to do that as well on this one, the second material. Just because these don't really have any sort of shine or like plastic feel to them. It's basically just going to be in the color. So now I think what I want to do is I want to add in, I'm going to add in a noise, at least for my scene, to try to get some of this color variation. And we'll see, if I just jump out of my camera, we'll just focus on like this E. This E gives us a pretty good preview of what's going on. So I actually need to go then into my noise and punch this value in. So this RGB value. So 155, 148. So this is 129, 155, 148. And then I'll jump back to Photoshop and try to grab one of these lighter colors. And I've just got my RGB over on my other screen. So this is 189, 198, 198, oops, 189, sorry. So we're starting to get some of this kind of splotchiness that our noise material is giving us, but it's not exactly what we want right now. I think I need to raise up the scale of this, and we'll see that the pattern of this will start to change a bit. I really don't want it to be too splotchy, because as we can see, this is freaking out. The variation in the color is not really that, it's not that apparent, not like it was before I changed this value. So I'm just going to jump back into my camera and just render this and see what this is looking like. So I think I'm just going to darken this green color a little bit more. Just going to accentuate. That looks pretty close. Good enough for now. I think I can do a little bit of improving in After Effects. So I'm pretty happy with that. Now the most kind of crucial part of my animation, I think that I can do within Cinema 4D, is the way that the word covenant animates in. So now let's just watch from the start here. We don't really see any of the letters when it first starts. They appear in one at a time. So how would I approach animating these in? And these are just opacity fading in one letter at a time. So how would I do that?
Can you keyframe the opacity at each step?
There isn't really a opacity keyframe in the sense that you guys are thinking of. Like if I try to do like alpha and I try to put in like noise or something to animate in the alpha channel, that wouldn't do what you guys are thinking of. But I think what I can do instead is try to use transparency, possibly. I'm just going to give this a shot. I haven't actually tried this ahead of time, so we're going to see what this winds up doing. Oops, I am editing the top material. Bad me. It is important to pay attention to what you're doing. Alright, so those now just turned invisible. But if I lower this now, oh, those are full now. Huh, how would we do this? That did it. Interesting. Okay, so just to kind of go through what I did, I turned on the transparency channel, and this is how we make things turn like glass or turn transparent, obviously by its name. But the key value I think that I changed here was this refraction. Now if I wanted to make like a glass bottle or some actual glass object, I would use a value that is closer to like 1.4 or 1.5. Now that's kind of a scientific thing, that number is actually based on the actual properties of light. But we'll go into some stuff like that in the next assignment where we actually make actual glass, or intentionally make glass. So I just guess for now I'm going to do 1.0.1, and what that's going to do is, you'll see up here, it's just giving it a very, very, very slight bit of transparency. And so now what we're seeing here, the object itself is transparent, but what we're seeing is the specular. Now, I think we've gone over specular a little bit in the last assignment, but when I turn off the default specular channel here, we see now that my text just disappeared. See, now that the word covenant is now no longer visible. And I can replicate this just by turning on and off this specular layer that's within the reflectance channel over here. And now I think the way that I want to animate my text coming on is by animating not that, but this. Yeah. So the specular strength down here, I had it on 4. And that's just, this is just kind of the way that I've got mine set up. Yours probably won't be too similar. But in here, I can add in a texture, and I think I'm going to try to use noise here as well. So let's just see what that did. So it's kind of giving it this sort of almost spooky, kind of somewhat ghosty look. If I zoom in on one of these letters, maybe we can start to see it a little bit better. It's starting to just kind of break up the appearance of this letter, and this is just with the noise value, the noise texture plugged into the specular strength. So the way that I did that was, I'll just show you right here on fall off. I just open up the little arrow and I loaded in a noise. And you can do that on almost any of these channels that you see the little down arrow. You can open up and you can apply a texture. Once I'm done with mine, which I'm not going to spend too much longer on, I'll go over actual proper metal, because I know that a lot of you will need to go over a metallic look, so I want to make sure that I arm you guys with that knowledge. So just jumping back to my letters, I think now what I also want to do is I want to raise up this global scale. Let's just see what this is going to do. Now this is kind of hard to edit with a limited screen size. So what happens if I raise up the contrast? There we go. So we've got a contrast value, which it's hard to show, but if you keep your eye up here, if I change this contrast and just put it back to 0, we'll see a pretty mushy, bland sort of gradient. There's not really any bright whites or dark blacks. But if we pump this contrast value up, we're going to start to see a pretty dramatic difference. And what that is going to correspond to is the fact that some of our letters are completely gone and some of them are visible. Now, one thing that I am noticing in my recreation is it's almost like the whole letter is coming in on itself. Now, if I wanted to, I could probably make one material for each one of these letters and keyframe it on a letter-by-letter basis, but, you know, that's probably something I would do in my own time if I was, you know, putting my heart and soul into the project and not trying to, you know, do this as efficiently for you guys during the lecture. So I think I'm just going to mess with this global scale a little bit more, try to bring this up, 1,000, not 100. Just trying really hard to shrink this so that it's all visible for you. Now that is giving me a little bit more determination, or a little bit more distinction from, you know, either the letters all the way on or all the way off. And I think what I can do now is, alright, so what I did, the value I just changed for mine was the high clip. Now if you've ever used the levels adjustment, like if I do like a Control L, what the white point, or what was that called? What was the exact word? High clip and low clip. This is kind of like these values here on the levels, if you've ever used the levels adjustment layer in Photoshop. So what I want to do is actually not bring the high clip up, I want to bring the low clip up. And you'll see that that just filled the box up here with complete black, and now all my letters are invisible. So I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to keyframe my low clip value at the beginning at 100, and then come up to, I'm just going to go to the halfway point, which is 75, and then animate that down to 0. So now a couple letters are visible, and then set a keyframe here on high clip, and then now for the rest of the animation I'm going to pump in a bunch of white, and so now all my letters are visible. So I'm going from 100 100 to 0 100 to 0 0. And what that'll do, hopefully, if I just set up a really quick preview render, hopefully this is going to go fast. So we'll see that if I edit my frame rate, the letters just kind of come on like a couple at a time. Which, it's not perfect, you know, letter by letter, it's not synchronized exactly as the trailer, but that's not...
It seems kind of close, though.
It is, yeah, and it's capturing the spirit of what the animation's doing. It's not an exact replica, but it's replicating the same thing that it was doing, if that makes sense. So...
Like the order in which the letters came on. I mean, maybe I'm just hallucinating.
No, you're right. It's the letters are coming on in the same way, but just in a different order, which is fine for me. You know, I'm only a half an hour into this, and I think for the most part, I can call my animation ready to move on to the next step, which makes me pretty happy as the lecturer. So I'm just gonna set that number back. So don't mess with this value until you're a little bit more experienced. That's the reason my render went so fast. So now would probably be a good time to save. So I'm going to save my version 2 file, just because it would be a shame if this computer crashed. So let me just check my reference video one last time to see if the words alien are doing anything. Nope. They're just fading off at the end, and it's actually more like everything is fading off. So I'm actually going to do the everything fading off in After Effects. That's a much more intelligent use of effort and or time to do something like that using After Effects and not Cinema 4D. So I think that I'm pretty much done. Just a little bit of texturing and the background color, I'm going to do those in After Effects. So now the last thing I think I want to show you guys is how to save with an alpha channel. If you're familiar with Photoshop and know kind of what an alpha channel is going to do, that'll be pretty obvious to you why we would want an alpha channel. But if you aren't familiar with what an alpha channel is, this is what it will look like. So an alpha channel, just the super brief explanation is it's a white to black version of your image that will show, it will either show or hide your image. So anywhere that's completely white, it will show your image, just like painting a mask in Photoshop. You know, white means you're showing the image, black means you're hiding the image. So I can see here, because I enabled the alpha channel on my save, in my save menu, I've got my alpha channel checked on. So that, I would say everyone probably should do this. it's just going to allow me more flexibility in After Effects, because I want to, I'm probably just going to recreate this kind of blotchy particle thing. I'm not going to try to do a screen grab of the actual texture. I'm probably just going to kind of recreate the spirit of it, so to speak. I know other people in here are going to want to place a background into their scene, so you will definitely want your alpha channel checked. And what I'm showing here in the picture viewer, I'm just verifying that my alpha channel is indeed working by selecting the frame that I know that I just rendered, and I'm going to layer here, and I can see my background, which is just my normal render, and then my alpha channel. So I can see these together. Now this little stuff down here I'm not going to be too concerned about, because I know the letters are going to fade in eventually. So I'm not gonna worry about those too much down there. But yeah, my alpha channel's working, so that's good. Now I can set up my render, so I can do all frames, save my name, do all this fun stuff, so I can make a render. So this will be assignment 2 title. And I want to change my name file to name.number.extension. Alpha channels checked on, which were good. You can ignore these straight alpha and separate alpha checkboxes. Those are.
I don't think you're going into your render.
It might not be. Good call. Thank you. So it's important to be in your render folder.
Otherwise, you have to pick up all those individual pictures.
Yeah, because then they wouldn't go in exactly the right place that I want them to. And then I'm just going to change my anti-aliasing to best. That's all good, I think. So I would be ready to click render. If you were me, or if I was me, I would be clicking render right now. But we've got some metal to go through. So I'm going to save my render for later, and we're going to jump into how to do a metallic texture, because I know that'll be important. So I'm just going to save my file, and then we'll just open up a new one. So this, we would be, you know, if you want to pay attention for the metallic texture part, then cool. Keep paying attention. If not, you can freely get back to work. But I'm just going to set up a really super quick scene. Cool. I'm going to do all caps. Cool. Text. Sweet. That is awesome. So I'm just going to make some pretend little setup here. So we're going to pick some font. That looks awful. Sweet. This is awesome. Do I have a bold? I do have a bold. Awesome. I hate having the grid visible, so I'm just going to click filter and uncheck grid. That thing pisses me off. Alright, so let's set up the reflection stuff. So I'm going to make a new material, apply this material, and what I need to do is just jump immediately to the reflectance channel, and I want to add a new layer. And the layer that I want to add is going to be, you can pick anything that's from these first four: Beckman, GGX, Fong, and Ward. These are all last names of important science rendering people. So let's just pick Beckman, because why not?
So how did you do that? You clicked layers and then add?
Yep, layer,
Okay.
and then add. So I've got this, and I'm just going to name this reflection. So we can see this chrome ball is now looking pretty chromy. And if we render, we don't see anything. Now, why is that?
Lighting.
Yes, lighting. So if you have ever seen a reflective object in your life, you'll notice that it's reflecting the stuff around it, right? If I had something shiny to hold up, I guess this bottle will suffice. You can kind of, let's just pretend that this was shiny and not transparent. You're seeing stuff through it and around it. It's interacting with kind of what's around it. And so what that means in our scene here is because we have nothing other than the reflective object itself, it has nothing to reflect. So how do we fix that? We can add some lights. So if I just add some area lights real quick, I'm just going to not put these in any particular place. I'm not even going to set up anything like shadows. I'm just going to add these into the scene just to demonstrate what's going on. Cool, so this is going to be bigger, further away. Cool, alright, awesome. Still not seeing anything. What did we do?
Is there a color like assigned to it, or is it just white?
It should just be interesting. Alright, let's try my next idea, which is what my recommended procedure would be to add a sky object. And if we render this, we see nothing because the sky object doesn't have a material applied. And we're still not seeing anything. Wild. We might not be getting anywhere far if I don't figure out what's going on.
You applied the material to the text, right?
Yeah. You can see the tag is on it.
Thingies there, that's how we tell.
That's kind of a thing now. Alright, so let's turn that off. Still nothing.
Maybe it's the type of lighting?
Could be.
Does that need to be like a spotlight, maybe?
It shouldn't need to be. Let's just... The joys of doing things live.
Does it matter if it's like, if you have a grid there, if it's below the grid, does it matter?
No, because there's nothing in the scene other than the text object itself. Alright, let me just proceed through. I'm going to click the word content browser over here on the right, and I need to save my project. If you guys are going to follow this step, save your project right now. If you're following the lesson on YouTube or whatever, save. Alright, so now that you've saved your project, you can click the search bar, and this is why we save, because this freezes the program. Alright, so now that we clicked on the little magnifying glass, we can type stuff in. So what I'm going to type in are 3 letters, HDR, and click enter. And what that stands for is high dynamic range. If you're a photographer person, those words will make sense to you. If you aren't, I can show you what one of those is. So if I double click this, it'll open up in the picture viewer. And what this is it's kind of like a panorama, if you've ever taken like a panorama with your phone, but it is in a certain perspective angle from the camera. So if I actually open up another one that's hopefully not as crazy looking. Yeah, so this looks more like a normal panorama. If you did like a whole 360 out in the middle of this parking lot with your phone, you would get an image that kind of looks like this. You know, if you're looking over at the building, it kind of looks a little warped. just because of the nature of the camera lens, but we can kind of go all the way around, and this is almost like we're panning through the scene. And what this is this is capturing all the information above and below us in this photograph. So what we can do is we can save this, but I'm actually going to find a different one. The one that I want to use is this one, because this has got some crazy white and black lights. This is just one that I personally use quite a bit. But feel free to scroll through here and find something that might suit your scene. You know, if you've got an idea in mind, like maybe a warehouse or something, or if there's like a mountain environment scene, maybe your text is like I don't know, a show title or something, and it's like outdoors. You could pick something. So find something fitting. You can also go onto the internet, and if you wanted to type in HDR texture, or you can go to your favorite texture website. So there's like just gazillions of these on the internet. Cool. And you want to use the ones that look like panoramas, like so stuff like this, or stuff like this. You wouldn't want to use this. As cool of a rock or wood, as cool as this looks, you would not want to use this to light your scene, because this is wood. This is not a light. So this crazy thing over here is almost like a light studio with a bunch of soft boxes and bounce cards. Those are photography words, so sorry if those don't make sense. But what I'm just going to do is I went up to File, Save, and I want to save this into my project. So I would put this in text, make a text folder, and I'll just name this HDR metal texture. The reason I want to save that is so that way I've got the actual file with me, and then when I go, if I go home and work on this, or I go work on it in another room or another computer or whatever, I've got my texture. Because otherwise the assets in the content browser are tied to that one specific computer. So that's why it'd be like if you had something saved to the downloads folder and you try to move your computer, your project wouldn't, you'd have some sort of errors or whatever, and that would bum you out. So to actually use this scene, or use this image to light my scene, what I want to do is uncheck everything else except for luminance. So we can use light objects to light our scene, or we can use luminant materials. If you are doing something like a candle, that might be a good time to use something like this, or in our case, an HDR. So in my luminance, I'm just going to load up that texture that I saved to my text folder. Cool. And we can see that this image thing is like surrounding us. So if you pick an outdoor landscape thing, it'll look, it'll look like you're outdoors somewhere. It'll be pretty cool. And let's pray that if we render, we now start to see something. Cool. So the reason the front of this object is black is because it is reflecting what's behind the camera, otherwise like what's behind us in the scene. And if we look over that way, we see that there's a whole bunch of black over there. So that's why. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to rotate this. So there's like a whole bunch of light stuff over this way. So I'm going to like get all these to be aimed at the front of my text so that I can see it. Awesome. Cool. We're starting to see something now. Now this doesn't look like very realistic metal. This looks like the first CG metal ever made. And the reason for that is because we added the reflectivity, but we didn't really edit any of the settings. The default settings for this aren't really that realistic. And the biggest reason for that is because almost everything, no, I should say everything that is reflective is rough to some degree. Even very, very polished chrome. Imagine the shiniest chrome bumper you've ever seen on a car. That is not 0% rough. That is like a 0.5% rough or a couple percent rough. Whereas something, I still don't have anything reflective. Well, I suppose this is metal, my laptop up here. This is, I believe, aluminum, and this is a very brushed aluminum. This is not a polished or smooth aluminum, so this might have a roughness of like maybe 60%, something very, very high. And we'll see this little preview window. Not the most perfect angle to show. So we can see that this is starting to look less like a mirror, but it's like kind of grainy and like messy looking. And the reason for that is because down at the bottom here, we've got a button called layer sampling. And sampling is kind of like a 3D word for quality. You'll learn more about that if you take the advanced rendering course. So I'm just going to raise my sampling from 4 to 6, and that will mean that this will look a little bit less grainy. It looks a little bit smoother, which is good. Whereas if I lower this all the way down to like 2, which is considered a very, very low, it looks like dirty. This is called noise, sampling noise. So something like 6 will get this to smooth out. Now you might not even have to change that value in your scene, but I did. But this roughness is probably a little bit too much. So this is starting to look a little like something now. What I'm actually going to do now, I would be careful if you try to do this yourself on your computer at home. I turned on the interactive render region down here, and it gives me this little preview box thing, and this will render. If I give it a second and I move around, it'll kind of render automatically. There's this little arrow thing that represents like a quality button on the side, so I'm just going to raise that up a little bit. Now this by any means is not as good of quality as your final render, but this will just allow me to kind of show you guys what these different portions of the reflective material are going to do. Can't raise this up. Cool. Alright, what I'm trying to do is I'm trying to edit the caps on my object. So if I zoom in and we look at the kind of the corner of this edge, we see that there's kind of a what's called a bevel. So if I turn this back to cap, which is what the default setting is, we see that this is just a hard edge right here. Now again, another one of those things that is a realistic part of real life is there are no perfectly sharp edges on anything. If you look at your desk or the desk that I'm sitting at, even a relatively fine corner, or even maybe the metal edge of my laptop, even this has a small amount of a bevel into it. And so we beveled some stuff in our desk scene, but we don't have to go through all those strict modeling tools using like the knife tool and all that. If we are using MoText, what we can do is come over to the caps section, and we can change this from cap to fillet cap. And the default settings are the reason why this looks like this almost looks like big chiseled text. So I think I'm going to raise the step value of this a little bit. This will hopefully smooth this out. If I just show you guys in the viewport here, yeah, this is starting to look more rounded out, kind of like a 3D bubble text. So what these fillet caps are going to do is it's going to allow your scene to catch reflections on kind of the edges and corners of stuff. I probably should have prepared a handy example of a photograph that would illustrate this. But I'm sure some of you will have examples where even just in your text you will see a bit of beveling and a bit of reflection on those bevels. So the bevel portion, which are these fillet caps, in combination with the reflectance channel, this is how you will get some metal looking stuff in your scene. That will pretty much conclude the metal portion of this lecture, although there is one little shortcut that you can take. If that seemed like too much work, you can type metal to the content browser. And if I view this as icons instead, and this is super tiny and hard to see, but if I just open this up, we'll see that there's a lot of metal in here. So if you want to do, this is like rusty steel, or like some brass, or like gold. There's just a whole bunch of cool stuff in here. Feel free to pick from stuff like this, or you can go on to CG textures or whatever. If I just type in metal texture into Google, you can find some metal like this. And when we were doing like wood grain or whatever, we plugged the wood grain image into our color channel. What you would do with a metal texture is you would plug that metal texture into the reflection strength of a reflective metal. So if I wanted to get like one of these brushed or scratched metals, something like this maybe, if I thought this was cool, if this was a reference that very, very closely matched, the text or the title sequence that I was trying to do, you would want to save it, save it into your texture folder the same way. But this is where reflection strength texture, this is where you would plug your material in. And that's that. That's intro to metals.